Okay, so actually with the turnover that we had, we're actually not doing too bad. Our PEP, if you look at the budget numbers, is all expended, but that's that's in large part due to the when Bruce Prenda, my former chief deputy, left the office. That was a big payout for Bruce. And then we had Eric Senowicki, who was in our civil division. He also left the office. We had a payout for that. And then we also had Jolene Vanis, which we knew about that one. So we kind of were waiting. We knew that one was going to come. But then these other two we really didn't know about. So so we've had, if you look at the budget, it looks like the PEP is a little bit out of whack. But I think we're going to be okay budget-wise with salaries. What we and I think we've had this discussion with the board before, but when we're trying to hire attorneys, the bar is in July, and they don't get the results until September. And so a lot of the law firms, a lot of the private firms will hire their law clerks early on, like in the spring. So we did that this year. We hired 2 of our law clerks to be senior certified. They're senior certified law clerks, so they, under the supervision of an attorney, they can continue to work and do work in the courtrooms. We have 2 individuals that we've kind of targeted to say, hey, if you can pass the bar, you'll have a job here next fall. And now they're going to just basically shadow attorneys in their areas that they're going to be in. And hopefully we can keep those law clerks when they become attorneys, because they're very good clerks, and we think that would be a good thing for us. We also have a Colin Preble. We hired him to kind of replace Eric Senowicki. Eric left to go up to the U.S. Attorney's Office up in Omaha. I think that was mainly they pay more than we do. So that was one of the reasons he left. And then Haley Husson. Anyway, Haley was a former law clerk for us. She then, after she passed the bar, she went and she was a term clerk for one of our Court of Appeal justices, and she's coming back to us after the 1st of July. So that then we should be, with the 2 that we're waiting and those 2 attorneys that we hired, we should be a full staff. That is, unless we had 2 attorneys that applied for Judge Ott's opening in district court. They had their committee hearing yesterday. As of just before I walked over here, I hadn't heard that they had released the names of who made it out of committee, but there was only 3 that applied for that position, and I believe they're required to send 2. So there's at least a 50-50 chance that I may lose another attorney there. So that's something that I will be considering. But I think as far as salary goes for our attorneys right now, we should be okay. The main thing is that middle paragraph there, which Dr. Bowen informed us that he was increasing the autopsy cost by $300 per autopsy. As you can see, through January 13th of this year, that would be about a $6,300 increase that we weren't expecting. So, but we don't know how many autopsies we do in a year, and so we will see how that goes and keep Dennis apprised if that looks like that's getting to a point where we may need additional appropriation. But right now, we'll see. Let's see. With Dr. Bowen, I think we've talked before. We were talking about maybe some things that we could do to help with some of those costs. We are still talking about that, and we'll see what happens with that. Concerning our future expenses, and I heard this morning Dennis was talking about the reclassification, and that's what I'm asking for in particular in regards to that 3rd paragraph. And I put 2 documents attached to my letter, so you could kind of see how our office is currently set up and what we're hoping to do with these 3 supervising attorneys. It's not we're not asking to add any FTEs, but we're asking to have another classification for attorneys. So we have attorney 1s and attorney 2s, and we would like to have a classification of supervising attorneys who would then supervise like 6 to 7 other attorneys, and then they would report to my chief deputy. Right now, I have a chief deputy of the office who is also the chief of the criminal division. I have a chief of the juvenile division who oversees 6 attorneys, a chief of the civil division who oversees, I believe, 6 attorneys, and then the chief of my criminal division, I think it's about 27 attorneys. So it's quite a big number, and what we're trying to do is hopefully get that number down to where he can be talking with 3 attorneys, kind of seeing how things are going. I think that would give us a little better understanding of what's going on in the office. You have to remember that some of these attorneys, like in our drug dockets, are handling 250, 300 cases each. So when you have that many cases for, you're talking, 900 cases between 3 attorneys, and then you expand that out to 24 others that you're trying to watch. It gets a little tough. We started this process with Doug McDaniel a number of years ago. HR did agree that they thought this would be a good idea to expand this. And then it would also, the one thing I proposed is tying this salary to, or what I would propose is tie that salary to my salary and to the elected Christie's and my salaries are set, as you know, every 4 years. And so what I'd like to do is tie the attorney 2 and supervising attorneys to a percentage of of my salary. That is something that's looked at every 4 years, and then a determination is made for an increase or where that should go based on the market. So that's what I would propose. That way, again, it would kind of alleviate that the process where they would have to go out and get a market analysis and see what attorneys are making elsewhere. And again, it seems rather, well, it may seem not so intuitive, but with the sheriff and all the law enforcement, everything's going up, and our attorneys are looking at that. They're looking at some of the, I think the city attorney has senior attorney classifications, and they're looking at them and where their salaries are, and just feel that we need to move ours up. I think that would also assist both Christy and I in maintaining good attorneys that are senior attorney 2s, to keep them when they know there's always an opportunity for them to make, although not a lot, but a little bit more money. And we would tie that same formula that we have for merit increases on attorney 2s to those supervising attorneys. So that's what I have for those. I would note our PROS data update. We have started that. We had that in our budget for this year already. We have begun that. I think they told us at the initial or at the kickoff that we're probably looking at October before it being fully up and running. So that would be good. That'll be good when that's done. We are looking to kind of do some things with perhaps Power BI to do things in regards to dashboards for our office to make it easier for anybody to basically see what's going on in my office. And I think that's just what we're seeing nationwide going forward. Of a lot of the public offices, people want to have that ability to see what's going on. I think that's perfectly legitimate. So we're looking at, and we're talking with PROS Data of how we can make those two things kind of go hand in hand with what we're doing now. I would note when Amanda was talking this morning, she said that the levels or the number of court appointments has gone down over the last 4 years. Again, I had better access to the data that we have in our system, I mean, I can pull it, and I'm working on pulling that for the Justice Coalition tomorrow. But I think some of that is probably directly related to our pretrial diversion programs that we've initiated and our problem-solving courts. You know, the need for those have gone down. And again, like I said, I've said this before, I think the board's coming, some of the board members are coming on February 8th to see graduation of our treatment diversion. And I just think that's a great program, great use of our funds. And not only does that, you know, help these individuals, but it helps the county in keeping those court appointments down. So with that, I don't know if you have any questions. I don't know, Dennis.
I was just going to say, after you brought up the cross data, I just received the first invoice, so I assume something was starting over there.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions for you.
Sure.
So you said you were talking about creating a new classification of supervising attorney.
Correct.
Have you talked through salary amounts and stuff like that? Like what, like how might that be different than what someone is currently classified as? Is it?
Well, currently by resolution, attorney twos are capped, and I think that right now is about 135 or 6. Christy, do you know? I think that's about it. So what I would like to do is on attorney twos and on supervising attorneys, put both of those as a percentage of the elected official salary. So, like I said, it wouldn't be any FTEs, but it would mean that then those 3 attorneys, and again, Commissioner Schulte, I'd have to go back and look, you know, what I was looking at, you know, maybe somewhere in the range of 75 to 80% of my salary, Christy and my salary for these attorneys, and have a range, like a starting range, and then they'd be able to have merit increases depending on, you know, what we see in them. So.
Okay. Then you also said, and you mentioned this, and it says it in here too, when compared with other government agencies, like when you do that, are you talking about state? Are you talking about the city? Like what?
Yes, and yes.
Okay.
So yeah. I mean, we're talking about all those. I'm not sure how much difference it was with Eric. I know it was a fairly significant increase that he was taking by going to the U.S. Attorney's Office and starting there. We had an attorney that left our office and went into private practice and received about a $50,000 increase in pay. You know, the city attorney, they have attorney ones and attorney twos, but then they also have senior attorneys, and I think some of those senior attorneys are up around 151,000 that they're at, and they have no more seniority than some of the longer attorneys that have been in my office and in Christie's office, and our attorneys handle much more serious cases. I mean, we handle the murder cases, the robberies. The cities don't handle those cases. So
I'm hearing you say, I don't think we'll ever really be able to compete with private practice because the sky's the limit for those guys in a lot of ways, but you're saying that compared to the city, we're comparatively under.
And compared to the board here, so.
Okay.
Thanks. I'm concerned about anybody supervising 20-some employees.
Yeah, I think that's yeah, and with the number of cases that they're handling, it's problematic. And I think we could look at, you know, if we have the supervising attorneys, they could look at ways to implement some things that we would like to try to do to speed up the process of getting cases through the court systems.
Any other questions?
Appreciate you laying this out for us, Pat. I like the chart, and if I'm following it correctly, on page 17 with the proposed
Right.
changes, you've got the 3 deputies that are all tied to your salary, and you're proposing 3 more positions.
No, it would be 3. It would, so if you look on the other page that has the 1, it would be 3 attorneys from that line already that we're just moving up to a supervisory attorney. So no more employees, no more attorneys.
I did hear that.
Yeah.
So
'Cause I know how the board is scrutinizing additional
As
FTEs.
smart as you look, Pat, I'm just saying, you got it, so I appreciate that. So then these three, you'd just be working with HR to determine what the right percentage range would be.
Correct.
Okay. I appreciate you bringing this to us. I think it's good management, good governance.
Again, look at it when we see everything.
I think so. That's our plan going forward, that we're forewarned and hopefully HR will be in position.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been discussing this with them for probably better part of 3 or 4 years, so,
It does with the Agile.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, thank you. Christie? Do you need to sit in front of this letter then? Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
No, I'm good, I brought
Okay.
it. Thanks.
All right, so Christie's stuff will start on page 18 of that PDF. Okay, Christie, go ahead.
So thank you for letting me talk to you. And I presented a lot of information in my letter because I'm new to this, and I thought I would just throw it all out there and let you know kind of what's going on in our office and some of our plans for the future. I will keep an eye on the budget. It looks like right now we're at 50.3%, if I'm reading that correctly. And we have been over budget in 2 categories. There's a typo in my letter about the memberships and dues. It was just for that 1 month because it was a big month. But it's PEP and computer equipment. The computer equipment, we are, let's see, about 4,000 over right now, and that was due to the expenses that are listed there, Adobe Pro and adding some Blu-ray players to help us deal with discovery that we get from the county attorney's office. But the major expenses were the kind of unplanned for retirements by Bob Hayes and Monica Ross Williams. Monica was our office manager, and then Mr. Hayes had been in the office for over 30 years, as well as Ms. Ross Williams. She had been in for probably 40. And so their amounts were pretty high for PEP. And then Mr. Nigro's recent separation from the office was about $62,000. So those were not budgeted for or planned for, but still, it's good that we're at 50.3. So we're doing okay right now, and I'll keep an eye on it and keep in touch with Dennis because he's a big help, especially since this is all first for me, and you know it's all a new process. I just got access to OpenGov yesterday, but still I can't look at budget stuff. But so, did you ever get access?
I'm looking at it from the public view. So I'm
Yep,
like you, so
yep,
I'm
yep,
quite
yep.
not all the way in.
So if you go down to our wish list, our office currently is down 1 attorney. Nathan Sryaka from our office left in mid-January to go work in a law firm here in Lincoln. So we're down 1 attorney. We're looking at trying to hire somebody on. We don't have anybody yet. In looking at how we want to look at overloads for the next fiscal year and starting now, our plan is to not overload like my predecessor did on serious major felony cases, even if we are in overload status for other felonies. So if we get a murder case or something at the end of the month and we have been overloading on felonies, it is going to be our practice to not get out of that case unless there is a conflict of interest, which ethically we can't keep a case then. But previously there had been a practice to just overload regardless of the seriousness of a case. And it's been discussed already by the district court and by Mr. Condon about the seriousness of cases and how murder cases have been rising, and I hope it's a fluke. But our office is certainly more capable and able to deal with those cases than your typical private law firm. And so we intend on trying to keep most of those. The problem is they take a lot longer. They are more serious. They are more stressful for our attorneys. There will be increased deposition costs and expert witness fee costs. And so that's my paragraph 1 that kind of talks about the need for that. We now have, I think, 8 major cases open. We have 13 felony attorneys, and so more than half of them are dealing personally with a major case. So that's, those are going to be some increased expenses if we continue to take those. Our budget was $27,000 for the fiscal year for expert witness fees, depositions, evaluations, those kind of things. But one case, one expert witness on a case that we had was going to be asking $11,000 about. So you use up a lot of your budget on one major case, just so that you know. Prosecutor data, I do not see that this was in our, with defender data. They're kind of corresponding computer systems. So I think Pat notified you guys of that last year in his budget. And I don't see that that was asked for or put out to you necessarily in writing. But Pat gave me information from Justice Works about their estimate of $72,000 compared to the county attorney's side of it, $102,000. And the reason it's less is because hopefully they will have worked through some of the system bugs and some of the things by the time they get to modifying that for defender data. I emailed Gordon from Justice Works, and he estimates that they will get more money type information to me, budget information, by February 10th. So I'm hoping to get that. I'm going to stay on him and try to get some information for you. I don't have it now, exactly how much that's going to look at costing us. But we'd like to get it in the works as soon as possible. Our current system is kind of buggy, and it's more difficult with things being done online now with the court modification and the court rules changing. So that's one thing to look at. Categories 3 with respect, paragraph 3 with respect to a social worker, I've been in contact with HR. It's a reclassification issue, and so they're looking at that, as well as for the investigator, paragraph number 6. Same kind of deal. I've reached out to HR, and we'll see what they say. Paragraph 4, Mr. Condon already talked about. Currently, we have one attorney who would be in that senior category who is maxed out, Webb Bancroft, and so that would affect him. Soon it will affect other attorneys as well, but right now it's just Webb for that. We have had over the last 4 years about a 40% turnover. There have been 10 attorneys who have left in the office, and so we've got some younger, newer attorneys in the office, some people who transferred in at after having been a private attorney for a while. So we've got a big range of experience in the office. So we may need to hire somebody on if we're going to fill Mr. Sarayakov's position with someone who hopefully has more experience, and then hopefully pay them a little bit more than the standard entry level. So I'm in agreement with the comments made by Mr. Condon about the salary ranges and how we deal with that when someone's maxed out, because we do need to keep the experienced attorneys in our office. We've had a lot of them leave lately, so. Paragraph 5, if we're going to look at taking more of the major cases, and if you consider the increase in the hourly rate for contracted attorneys, then through the courts, the appointed attorneys, it may be better, and I can try to run some numbers for you, to let us hire 1 or 2 more attorneys in the public defender's office, but you'll have to see how those numbers crunch out. The 125 hasn't been happening for so long, and so you're probably going to want to look at that some more. But with us keeping more serious cases and the rates increasing, it may be economically feasible to have more in the public defender's office as attorneys dealing with that. So
I think we would like to see numbers on that, Christie, because that concept's been around. To actually know how the numbers play out. It's a big deal.
Yeah, I think, Christie, for the most part, I think it's the toughest thing has always been proving it out. Because we'd always still see the court-appointed attorney fees just still increasing no matter what we did. So I think we got to just come up with a way to kind of actually prove that out.
And then paragraph number 7 is just some minor things. I have those on hold right now because of the big PEP payments. I'm trying not to spend a lot of money, just so you know.
Good.
I tend toward frugality, I think. So, paragraph number 8. This is Justice Text is a cloud-based system that will transcribe from a DVD. Say you're watching a police officer stop somebody, and it's a cruiser video. And currently, the county attorney's office doesn't have the police department or the sheriff's office transcribe those. So our attorneys sit there and you watch that for 2 hours, and you got to write it all down by hand, and it's really time consuming. Or you can have the secretary do that, but that's very time consuming as well to type all of that down. This is a system that Tom Riley in the Douglas County Public Defender's Office, he's using it. It's kind of pricey. It's $1,200 per attorney per year, and you can't all share, you know. So if I've got, like right now, 8 attorneys, I'd have to buy 8 licenses. But it is a way to transcribe that footage, probably at a cheaper rate than what we'd have to pay a secretary to type that up. So that's something that I'm looking into more. I'll reach out to Tom Riley. I just talked to the Justice Text people last week. The alternatives are, you know, asking someone to type out transcripts of that. And back in the olden days, in the 1990s, when I was in the office, it would be automatic that we would get, you know, like a victim statement or something, and that would automatically be typed out. It's not always the case now that we get everything typed out, and so just maybe budget for the law enforcement, because they used to type that out at the request of the county attorney, but we don't always get transcripts, so we spend a lot of time watching those DVDs and all of that body cam information. So just a thought. I left one thing off of my list, and I was listening to the person talking about the juvenile detention center, and our front desk just has one of those metal frame screens that's about, I don't know, 4 feet high, and it sits on top of her desk. I'd like to have an architect come in and look and see if they could do something a little more permanent like the county attorney's office has. There was recently remodeling, and they have like a glass wall or whatever that protects that secretary right there at the front desk answering the phones and helping people better than our dumb little thing that we have now. So I didn't put it on my list, but I would like to look in that. I talked to property management. They came over, looked at it with me. Because there is a glass wall on the side, it's going to take a little bit of finagling to try to figure out how to make that work. But it's really not secure right now, and so I'd like to look into that. So that's what I have on my list. And I also agree with Mr. Condon about the positive use of problem-solving courts and trying to get people into diversion, regular diversion, mental health diversion, and all of the different problem-solving courts. I'm a fan of trying to help the person out as a whole, and I think those things really make people's lives change for the better. So, questions?
Thanks for your leadership. I know you and I are both getting used to this, and so I'm glad to be. I wanted to praise first of all your leadership on wanting to not overload felony cases. That's something that I haven't been here very long, but I've heard about the office several times, so I'm glad that's one of your initiatives.
And that's on major felonies. If we take more major cases, we may have to get out of a bunch of those possession of controlled substance, which are class 4 felonies, low-level felonies. So we'll have to see how it all pans out. But
I interject that I totally agree with that philosophy, though, because your folks are the ones who are better equipped for these major cases, in my mind, and then the contract attorneys who maybe aren't doing this full time, we also pay them a lower rate, but that's kind of secondary. But I just really think the philosophical shift
No, totally fine. I agree. I think especially a younger public attorney could learn a little bit more. I did have two questions for you. So you said that, but then you also said that that might cause some increased deposition costs and stuff. Were those deposition costs not previously? I mean, because if you outsource the case, my perception would be that we would still have paid those deposition costs if it was carried by an outside attorney.
But they're not in our public defender budget.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So where would they have been when they budgeted?
Comes out of the district courts, doesn't it?
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
The court, okay.
Yeah.
The district court.
Fees, yeah.
And then my second question was both you and Mr. Condon talked about caps on your attorneys. I'm just curious, after how many years are people hitting that cap? Is it 20 years, 12 years, 3?
Pat left. Well, you know,
And if someone else,
I was capped
Dennis,
out
maybe you
for,
can give me
I
that
don't know.
later too.
I was capped
Yeah.
out for a long time. I was capped out probably maybe 8 to 10 years. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
But there were
less
years
than a
and
decade.
years when I was capped out and unable to get raises. So, and I worked in the office from January of '90 to January of '22.
Okay,
So, 32 years.
thanks for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Terry, coming on up? Okay. I didn't know if you wanted a part of this or not with that shoulder.
If I could get a sympathy vote.
Bennett, you all right without me? You got that?
I got that.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't either.
Oh, okay, great.
And I forgot my glasses. Recently hit
So
me.
do you need me to
Well,
read
both
that?
of you are, both of you are hindered.
I'm sure it says cut, but.
I'm sure.
They're handing money back.
That's one thing we ended up doing at the beginning of the budget thing. On our first one, we ended up giving it back on that. We are right on the pace right now, and we're a little concerned about gas maybe. That's supposed to be coming in the next couple of months, so those are the things that I think we're.
And Ben, I think we tweaked your fuel a little bit when we made that $240,000
We did.
reduction. I think by 20 or something, 20,000?
50.
Oh, 50, okay. Okay.
So yeah, and we budgeted one for a retirement, but he decided to stay on, and then he is going to next budget year is going to retire at that point in time. So we had those at this point in time. So we're sitting really well. So that's one reason why we sat and asked for our 5th of deputy at this point in time of our 6-on-6 for those that have been here for that at this point. With that, if we did this in March, which I believe would be about the time we would be hiring, because of April would be the time the academy starts, we would need to be able for a total to have his wages and do all those kind of things and his benefits. It would cost us $26,421, which we would have in our budget. Now, the next budget year, it would be that, but we would not be needing to ask for an increase at this point in time. So we are asking to do that and go from there and add that individual at this point in time.
You're asking to add him in March, Ben?
Yes.
That would get him into the academy?
Yes.
So, Ben, what's kind of the number you're shooting for that you need to hire in March?
John, I think we got 3 that we're going to be needing right at this point in time.
2 to 3 without this position.
Yeah. We had 4 in the academy. We're down to 3 now at this point in time, so that added 1. An individual had some troubles with some tests, and we had to relieve him from a duty on that. So that's where we're sitting at that point in time. So yeah, that we're asking at that. I know we took one of our positions for deputy and made the crime analysis position out of that, and it was it didn't cost us anything out of the budget, at probably even a little bit less on that end of it too. So we've done that part of it. Some of our capital future things, as you know, we're going to need some new rifles here in a little bit to replace some. on that. We just did our handguns, so that's one of the things that we're looking for, extended cost. The radio system, as you know, when we did this last one, it was real expensive. We're looking at maybe 2038, but I don't want to come here and ask for 2.5 million. I'd rather kind of ask for little bits as we go along and add to it at that point in time. So the CGIS project, we have $1 million of our FAC funds that we have put to that. Now, I don't know if you're going to use all that at this point
Right,
in time.
right.
But it is there, and I think we're the only agency that's coughed up money to help on that part of it. So that's still there and doing that part of it.
And I think, Ben, hang on a second. Matt, I think this is part of when we're talking about, when I was trying to talk about the federal forfeiture stuff, where Ben probably has all of it mapped out to certain, this is why some of it doesn't get spent maybe as quick as that budget is set up for, is because some projects, the CGIS project is, how long a project is that?
3 years.
Yeah.
I think we're a little bit ahead of, I think it's about 2.5
Okay.
years, but, and I can't wait till you guys see that. There's some parts of it's coming in, and it's, what some of the guys are saying, it's unbelievable. So, I mean, we're gonna be on cutting edge, and it's really cool and exciting. So, I mean, I know it costs a lot, but it's gonna be worth it. It's gonna help a lot of different agencies out at that. The new storage facility, I think I don't know if emergency management has talked on that, but we are,
Jim did earlier.
yeah, we are filled to the brim out there at 444 at this point in time with some of our specialty equipment. And we house our crash team out there. Well, it's a secure facility, and so anytime there's a shooting or anything like that out in the county or in the city, a lot of times they're using that facility to store the cars so that they can do a search warrant and do all that stuff. So then we're losing that space for a little bit because you can't have people walking in and out of that. So it'd be nice to be able to do that and be able to have our Bearcat and our mobile command post and things like that, being able to have it easier to access out. And we just have a lot of different equipment. We have the camera trailer and all that. We just keep getting, I don't want to say toys, but equipment out there and do that part of it.
Let's never say toys.
Yeah. So, also, we just finished our remodel in our records. And if you haven't, please come over there and look at that. It's really looks good over there. So I've talked to Karen and the Public Building Commission, and we're going to start doing the only last thing we have left is our main area. And besides the public commission, building funds, we're going to use FAC funds. So I'm not going to be coming over here and asking you guys to take money out of the budget or anything like that. I'm going to use my own money from that and do that part of it. So, and then you knew my training facility. I've come and talked to you about that. And, you know, as time goes and bad things end up happening because of lack of training in some of these other major cities, this is one of those things that I really think that can put us on the cutting edge and make sure we keep our individuals, our deputies, and our police officers and the surrounding ones trained to the highest level.
What's a greater, sorry, losing my voice. What's a greater priority, the storage facility, the training facility? Like if we're just numbering them, you know, 1 to 10.
Which one? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Storage versus training.
I would, for me,
Which would we do first?
I'd like to do the training, but I understand that the storage would probably be more cost efficient. I mean, it's not going to spend as much money.
No, of course, yeah. I'm just trying to get a feel for what's.
If my dream came true, it'd be the training facility.
Oh, okay.
But the storage really affects too.
No, it does. Yeah, I'm just.
I don't want to.
Factor in.
we just
yeah.
have
Yes, I know Jim and I have talked about that, and it's been a priority, and it is one for him too. So I mean, I certainly wouldn't be sad if either one of them got it going and taken care of. Do you have any other? That's all I have at this point in time. Do you have any questions for me?
Thanks.
Yeah, I felt good. She's done well, and we've done well on the budget part of it, and I feel really good about being able to come in here and tell you what we've got going. So,
Very good.
all right, thank you.
Very good.
Okay, Christy, ready?
I'm ready. So I'm just here to talk to you about some potential staffing issues that are facing our budget in the next 2 fiscal years. Specifically, the staffing changes emerged from the strategic plan that was recently adopted in December. First, under our welcoming and diverse communities goal, we had an objective to establish a communications position to develop a comprehensive, data-driven communication which we've also identified may include some marketing duties. I think what we have found through our partnership with Eleanor that we did for Youth Services Center, Corrections and Crisis Center is that the county doesn't necessarily have a presence or a brand in the community as an employer for recruitment purposes. So this is something that we would like to expand across all the departments in the county, and we think it would be more cost effective to do it in-house and perhaps keep some of that relationship with Eleanor on some of the
Probably
projects.
a little easier to reestablish different priorities, et cetera.
Yes. Yep. And then the second position that we identified, and it won't be coming at this budget year necessarily, was the strategic plan also talked about developing a climate strategic plan under our climate smart and resilient infrastructure goal. So that's something that may result in additional staffing or contractor fees in the next 2 years. That goal, I believe, the plan had set for the end of 2025 to come up with that, so we have some time there. But I just wanted to bring both of those to the board's attention.
On that note, I had the city send over, so Kim Morrow up in the mayor's office, kind of, it would be kind of like a sustainability coordinator is probably the closest analogy that I have for her role. So I asked the city just to send over their job description for her, and I just got that printed off so that everyone can take a look at it. I've also asked, LPS has a sustainability coordinator, Brittany Alvin, who's part of the Climate Smart initiative that we're talking, and she was going to send over the job description for that role as well. And so just something to put on your radar, and so that we had it.
The other thing I would add too, that is, I've been attending those climate smart meetings, and I felt like we are at a real deficit that we don't have dedication to that.
Yeah.
And so the way that some of these others have, because you're relying on me, and that's probably not the best.
I hear you.
But the reality is that if we want to move anything ahead, we need to be more proactive.
Fundamentally, we need a dedicated person to tackle some of these issues, and it's appropriate between DEC too. They could be doing efforts there. There's some things. Karen and PVC have done a really awesome job at energy efficiency, heating and cooling efficiency. There's been a bunch of good stuff there, but they could help out on some of that. And so it's just, I just wanted to put that job description in front of everybody, and whenever I get the LPS one, I'll send that out too.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, otherwise, we're on track budget-wise, so like I said, I just wanted to bring
Yeah.
those two potential staffing issues to their attention.
Future funding.
Okay, so I'm going to jump back over to the fiscal year 22-23 PDF that I had out there, and I'm gonna just start on page 14, just real quick, like to.
Sorry, Dennis, which one?
It's the
It's on the-
fiscal year 22-20. It's the first PDF
Off the
underneath the 9 a.m. thing.
Okay.
So I kind of just dropped a few numbers on here for mid-year appropriations, and right now some of these numbers might be high, because when Derek was talking this morning, I almost took it that depending on some of his staffing issues, they might be able to eat it, or at least eat part of it. So those numbers, these numbers here are so much different than what we've seen for a few years at mid-year. Now we still have to survive the next 4 or 5 months, but the numbers. The numbers are looking extremely well. If you take a look towards the bottom, when we did additional appropriations last year, and most of the time I just look at the general fund, because usually other funds, when we do that, we're usually amending it because there's some other type of funding source that's out there. So last year you seen that we were at about $1.4 million number. Again, 1.2 of that was really based off of those the contracts that took place during the budget year. So right now, I think this also just shows you that 1 month of health insurance that we didn't hit departments with has been kind of a game changer on a lot of this stuff. So so again, these are estimates at this point in time. We move forward, go the rest of the year and kind of see, because I think what you also heard was we're kind of on track, but if this happens or this happens, you just never quite know. So we'll write it out and we'll kind of see what happens.
At the moment, we don't think additional appropriations.
For the most part, it's going to be minimal. It's going to be minimal in comparison where we've been the last handful of years. So
It's pretty cool. As I say, as I knock on wood.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's. I mean, again, it all kind of depends on how we finish out.
Good.
But though, I just kind of wanted to get those out there to you. So let's scroll down, and I'm going to go down to page 16, and just kind of start talking about just a few projections and kind of what we'd possibly be looking at in some of the dollar wise. These next 3 pages are really me calculating out what would 2.5%, what would 3%, what would 4% do tax dollar wise. Below that, I'm just kind of showing you what happens with payroll numbers. Payroll numbers are kind of the thing that drives so much of it. So, if our payroll, if we start estimating out at 3% on payroll, you're talking about 2.286 million would be the increase. On a 2.5% increase, you would see that 2.5% increase doesn't quite cover that cost. And then you can kind of see with the 4 and a 5% on the payroll what it does. And when you look at 16, 17, and 18, I'm just kind of showing you what does that do tax dollar wise.
So on page 16, Dennis, that's the amount of increase at the.
So if we increased our property tax by 2.5%, we would go from that 89 or that 88.2, which is our current number, to 90.5, which would be about a $2.2 million increase. That there, I just wanted to show you what could payroll be doing, and how does that compare to that projected number. And that's why I say payroll drives. I mean, payroll drives everything. So, health insurance, the last, I'm going to say 4 years, and it could maybe even be 5. We haven't really had to do anything with our costs on health insurance. I don't know how many. Before that 4 or 5 years, we never was able to do that. So
Didn't we have a big hike our first year?
I don't remember.
think
I
you're
don't
right.
remember.
I think it's been about 4 years though. I think.
Yeah, I mean, it.
I know it's been a non-issue
When-
most of my career.
Yeah, when we made our move to Aetna, it's kind of flattened everything out. Now it changed some things, that people maybe had to deal with.
Yeah.
But cost for the county, it really kind of flattened it out. Now, this year, or before the end of this year, we will be doing an RFP for health insurance. So, so we'll have to see what happens there. But again, the current year that we're in, calendar-wise, we're pretty flat. So I throw that down there, knowing that health insurance, you really don't estimate out at 0% too much.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I understand. So you're saying, so this is saying if property tax valuations go up by 3%, this is the different, or what's going up
If
by
tax dollars go up by 2.5%, 3%, or 4%.
Tax always collected.
That's tax dollars. That's not changing anything based, because you're probably thinking a lot now with the percentage of valuations that are probably most likely coming out. I'm kind of projecting out more in this range. This is what it would do. So
So
what
the only number, the primary number you're changing is just property tax collections. You're not putting in here any kind of levy or valuation changes. You're just changing the property tax line.
Right.
Right.
And for the most part, I do that because I really want to focus on tax dollars and not get strictly into the guesstimate on levies and stuff like that. I think I like to focus on what do we need to get our budget adopted. And this just kind of shows you, if you stay in that range, how much is the payroll and benefits going to eat up that piece versus, because when you take a look at probably page 19 and page 20, you'll see all the future requests and needs. And when we start looking at those, and you start looking at what are we doing possibly on the tax dollar side, they will never match up to fund to fund every request. Because in all reality, last year, clerk of the district court, I brought over the microfilm project that they've got. That was not able to be funded. Juvenile court's got the renovation and remodel of 3 courtrooms. We've been carrying that for a while. We've been talking the extension building a while.
Mm-hmm.
So I've just tried to throw on here stuff that was talked about today versus including items that are still out there that will be discussed again as we move into the next budget year. Because
I think I've got a note for 2 other ones that I don't see on your list. And maybe I'm just thinking about it wrong.
what
But the 2 other that I had note of from today was and maybe this isn't small enough, so you're not included, but the Youth Services Center talked about reclassification of a couple employees. And then the other thing was that the engineer had mentioned specifically $1.4 million for some bridges.
Right. So the 1.4 million, I didn't include it because I didn't know what the number was.
Okay.
The youth services, that reclassification, I didn't include it because I didn't know if it would be a future request, because we've been trying to carry it, or we've carried it for a while, where we had at one time talked about making it a mid-year decision. But when we take a look at the other stuff, not only with that 1.4 million that Pam was talking about today, we're also trying to figure out how to fund the federal aid projects. We've got about 5 million set aside, but to tap into that other remaining amount, we will still have to get that up to about 7 million.
By when?
That, I think that will be 25 or 26. We'll be spending part of it as we keep going, but by that time, we would have to have had all the 7 million out there.
Does
So-
that number change with it, with inflated costs, or is that set?
No, I would assume it can change.
Yeah.
I would assume it can change.
Is it like a percentage or something like that, right?
Most of them are 80-20 splits.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So we're kind of based off of, that's kind of based off the numbers we had last year when we set the budget.
Did you say that the juvenile court, did renovate those 3 courts? Or
They
that's
have not.
still a pending thing? Okay.
Those are,
I misunderstood.
yeah, those are not. So those are kind of the items that that we have out there that as we go through the budget process, decisions will have to be made. I mean, that's kind of how it kind of goes every year as we kind of go through there. And but I wanted to kind of just get in your mind because of what those percentages, and I probably capped it at 4%, because I figure anything over 4%, then we're gonna have to talk about the pink postcard meeting and all of that. So
I don't think anybody wants to go that high anyway. Like,
yeah,
4% seems like a lot to me at the moment.
Right.
I mean, so that's kind of where I probably went 2.5, 3, and 4 because of that reason. But it gives you an idea of what will it generate versus what are all the different items that are going to be out there for discussion.
Going back to your property tax possession projections here, so I'm seeing the 2-3. I guess part of what's confusing me, and maybe I'm just overlooking it, I'm seeing that dollar amount change, but then all the payroll stuff stays the same, right?
Right.
So then there's no indication of what the actual difference is that I'm seeing. Like
Well, it would
that
be-
generates
So-
an extra $2
Payroll
million for
isn't
use.
dependent on.
I understand
Yeah.
that.
So all I'm trying to show you is up there under 23-24, and I'm on page 18 right now. What I'm trying to show you there, 91.8 million would be generated. That's an increase of 3.5 million.
Okay.
I'm then letting you say, hey, there's 3.5 there. Here's what payroll could take out of that piece going into next budget year.
Gotcha. So you're saying then if we did all payroll increases at 3%, that 3.5 million minus 2 1/3, 2.3, it gives us only $1.2 million of unassigned or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess that's where I'm missing, is I'm not seeing that difference listed, and that's what what was throwing me off.
Yeah, so that's really all that's kind of doing. And what it also tells you is some of the requests that are coming in, buildings at $1 million, things that it doesn't take much, Pam's 1.4 million she talked about. It doesn't take much, and there's nothing else left there. So, and that's why every year decisions have to be made, and that's why when we go down that list, some of those projects were just not able to be fit into that budget year.
It just seems like, and I know it's not always true, but 3 of the last 4 budgets, at a minimum, we've had unexpected expenses show up late spring, early summer, whether it was flooding or a pandemic or.
I was just saying, has there
Cost
ever been one?
increase.
Has there ever been one without it?
Well, that's the
I
question.
don't remember one that didn't have a shocker in
You know,
it.
last year we got hit with cost increases right in the middle of the budget process that threw everything into chaos.
It was inflation. I mean, it was salaries last year.
And all
It was
those salaries
inflation
we
and,
had to meet.
Right.
you know,
And
Right.
then sometimes the inheritance tax projections go down too. If they're up and down.
So,
Right.
as good a job as Dennis makes this into a science, that will last as long as it lasts. Nobody knows.
Now, one of the things that going into next year that that we will have a discussion on, that we haven't had a discussion on before, is the gaming tax.
Yeah.
So, so we've received 3 months plus that first week that came into play. And so right now we're right around about 100,000 a month that we're collecting.
are we seeing any drop in Keno?
Yeah, I'm really curious about that.
We haven't a whole lot yet.
Okay.
I mean, we haven't a whole lot yet. Now, so right now we'll have a discussion on what do we want to do with gaming tax. Right now, all we're doing is collecting it because we didn't really have any idea what it meant. So it's just collecting in its fund, and I figure that will become a topic of discussion as we talk about
And I don't.
23-24 budget.
I mean, until we know what's happening with inheritance tax, I don't even know how to answer that question. The most likely thing, I think, is just dump it into the general fund and buy down property taxes, right?
The two big things to me are that inheritance tax, and then also I'm concerned about what might happen to Keno long term.
Oh, yeah,
And we
no.
want to make sure that we're keeping those funds
Holding
there.
Keno harmless, yeah.
Yeah.
A big part of the sales job on that, on the gambling, though, was property tax relief, and they oftentimes talk in their stuff specifically about some infrastructure.
Right.
I mean, I know that was maybe not a promise that this board made, but that's clearly the way that was marketed.
Well, 70% of the tax revenue is cut off to go directly to property tax relief.
Before.
So our portion is down in the 12.5%.
Right, so some of that funding is going back to the state to be dropped into the property tax relief fund or whatever that's called. And then we get 12.5% and the city gets 12.5%. And right now, we're just in the early stages of out there with the casino. So as they, I think on the report that I get, there must be 4 or 5 different categories that fall into some type of waging or betting or something. So we're just in that first one. I tend to think once we get to sports betting and stuff like that, we'll see where numbers go. We'll see where numbers go. But right now, we're averaging about 100,000 a month.
Okay.
So let's go down to page 21. And just kind of talk about fund balance and cash reserve. Since we tend to talk about this, and I want to just kind of show you a few things that what we've been doing, how it's kind of helped us out a little bit. you know, because sometimes when you talk cash reserve, it kind of really means, so how does that really affect me? I like to talk cash reserve and fund balance because I think cash reserve drives fund balance. So when I think of cash reserve, what it says to me is we're not going to spend everything that we received that fiscal year. So it's always balance plus revenue is going to equal expenditures plus cash reserve. Those are the numbers that should agree. So for example, back when our cash reserve was about $6 million. And in all reality, in my mind, for a fund balance, we really needed to be at about $12 million for that next year. So how did that affect my thinking there? Well, what always concerned me was if we spend everything and we had received everything we budgeted for, if we spent it all, my fund balance would end up to be what that cash reserve was. Now, if I told you the balance was $6 million, but we really needed to start at 12, well, we're starting $6 million in the hole right away. So in my mind, as long as we've been building up that cash reserve, it doesn't only just help us for cash flow purposes, but it also allows us to drive that ending balance. So now when our cash reserve is $18.6 million, that now tells me our fund balance will not be below that unless something happens. Unless all of a sudden I show up and say, you know what, we're $6 million short in our estimated revenue. Well, that's going to cause us a problem. Or, hey, we really need to amend our general fund by $4 million because we got trouble. Once we do that, then it drives that. So I want to just kind of make sure that we take a look at both of those sides, because when we look at our general fund balance at July 1 of 22, coming into this budget year, our fund balance was $24 million. We set our cash reserve at 18, which feels like a good thing, other than in my scenario is if we spend everything that we budgeted to come in, we're still dropping our fund balance by $6 million. So that's why I want to make sure we understand that piece of it. The 18 million helps us tremendously in cash flow. It helps us tremendously. But we still got to remember about the fund balance side. It can still cause us problems there.
Matt, you'll hear me say this a million times, but when we first came on, Rick and I, 4 years ago, and when it sort of started with this board kind of here started talking about building up the cash reserve, there was a moment before property taxes would come in at the beginning of kind of in early March. There was a moment in February every year where Lancaster County could make one payroll, couldn't make two. And those were scary times. It was weird. It was the bank account got really low, and then it would come back in as property taxes came back up. But that was sort of when we started trying to prioritize, at least getting to that 2 months operating expenses, that 16.67%. And when the legislature talks about putting a cap on political subdivisions of 3% or maybe 4% with a supermajority override or something like that. None of that would be, I personally wouldn't find any of that terribly scary if there was also a provision that local political subdivisions were mandated to keep a cash reserve of, say, 16% or 16.7. Like, the idea of being capped doesn't freak me out in the same way as long as we know that there is a backup, right? Otherwise, if we're not able to have a substantial cash reserve, and I would argue 16% isn't very substantial. You go to the private sector, they're usually hanging on to at least a quarter or maybe half a year's operating expenses sometimes. Yeah, that's not uncommon at all. So, you know, 2 months operating expenses isn't a ton. It just, I always get anxious whenever they start talking about capping us, because it fundamentally it diminishes our ability to lower the levy when valuations go up. How can I in good conscience drop the levy if they're capping us and we know we'll never have the opportunity to make it back up again in an emergency? How you prove to the public that you're a good actor in this is when valuations come in high, like we've just done, we lower the levy, and that's what we should do, and that's what I hope we can do this year. I'm worried about seeing a cap come through. So that's my whole speech. You'll hear me do that every year.
Well, I would respond and say, Sean, I agree with you. I think having an appropriate amount. There probably are some subdivisions that have held too much.
Oh, totally. Totally.
2 months seems like a good amount to me, because, like you said, there are some months where things drop down, especially right before those property taxes come in. So 2 months seems to me appropriate. I would be hesitant to go beyond that, because unless you are doing an intentional cash reserve for some big capital outlay that's up and coming, So I would echo that and say, hey, I'm with you on that.
Perfect.
I don't think you need to be much beyond that.
Perfect. Yeah, and honestly, I would. If we ever actually saw 16%, you'd see me jumping on the table.
Yeah.
Like I'll do a dance for the whole county on that day. If we ever actually climb our way up to there, I feel like we've been bouncing around at the 12-13% just for a couple of years now, and I felt happy to be there because it was like 8. What was it, Dennis?
So if you go to page 12, I've got on there, I've kind of just got the general fund. You'll see the general fund balance, and you'll see cash reserve and stuff like that. And you will see, where we've actually been able to get that cash reserve up in about 5 years, as well as our fund balance. So
that's maybe my favorite thing this board has done.
I mean, it's helped. It's helped tremendously, and not only in the general fund, because I tend to always just talk general fund stuff, but when you talk about what we've done in the countywide sinking fund, starting to set money aside, not only for the CGIS project, now with the federal aid projects, we're trying to solve some of those issues so people don't show up to us saying, oh, by the way, next year I need $4 million. So I think we've done some of those things too, to kind of flatten out what kind of tax request numbers do we need on an annual basis, because if we would have had to come up with the CGIS money right away, we would have scrambled. If all of a sudden we're trying to do some of those federal aid projects, if we didn't start setting money aside a couple years ago, we'd be struggling with that too.
Yep.
I just want to clarify on this. The percentage underneath is the increase or decrease from the year before. Is that what that percentage is?
On under the expenditures.
Yeah, like every line, not all of them has. Yeah. Expenditures at 8.24.
Yeah, it should be.
So that should be 129, moving up to 140 is 8.24.
Yes.
So the budgeted expenditures grew up over 8% last year.
Yes.
Is some of that ARPA money?
Is that ARPA money?
Yeah.
This is general fund though.
Yeah, on general fund, it's going to be the union contracts. It's going to be the court-appointed fees.
Yep.
It's going to be our medical costs contracts out at the jail and the youth services center increased. So we kind of we had a few things hit us last year.
Yep.
Yeah, some of those are uncontrollable.
Yep.
Absolutely.
It was a lot all at once.
Yes.
3 different directions.
Right. So that and so that's kind of that last line item or that last line there is just kind of trying to to show, at December, over the last 5 years, where was it revenues less expenses? Always in December, our expenses are going to be higher than our revenues as we're waiting. But, it's kind of tweaked itself back up from last year. So that kind of tells you a few of our revenues have flattened out, that we talked about earlier, things like that. So that's something we also have to pay attention to also, is just what's happening on the revenue side, because sometimes we focus always on the expenditure side.
Right.
Well, one of the things I see about the property tax request, it had been at one time 12.99%, and now it's down to 2.51. Up 4 lines.
You're talking about the growth of the.
Back in the December of 19 one, that's where we kind of hit the RTSD levy.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think that was also the year that we dumped some extra money into
Yes.
into the county engineer funding
Mhm.
to get a few of those projects done, and then over the last few years we just kind of bought our way back down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like what Sean was saying, that's where, if there is ever a cap put out there, it forces us to think a little bit differently than what we have been. It forces you maybe to think about, do I just take it all because I might not ever get it again? And where we try to, where do we need to be? Let's make that work. And some years are better than other years, but we tend to try to make it the best shot that we can come up with.
I mean, when you don't look at county government in as much depth as Dennis takes us, it'd be easy to miss some of the changes that have taken place from December 31, 2018 to today. I remember that first budget cycle when we had a very minimal cash reserve, we had no sinking funds, we had so many projects that were demanding attention. We had record flooding that year in places that had never in history flooded. And that's why there is a massive increase there, because we just felt like we were in trouble on so many fronts. And yet, even in the midst of that, Sean, I remember we committed to raising the cash reserve.
It was the only way to get out of the problem. The only way to
We were
Yeah.
going to start the process, no matter how slow it was, or we wanted to make, because the problem with cash reserve, of course, is if you do nothing, you're falling further behind.
Mhm.
You're always further behind.
Well, in that first year, we actually did fall further behind. Remember that? We made a $2 million investment, and then fund balances came in 2.5. So we actually
Right.
So the challenges are real.
Yeah.
If you look at any specific part of the picture, you may not grab what the entirety looks like. So to see those numbers.
I mean, so many times it's something different, every year
Oh, God.
that we're trying to address. So other than the salaries and benefits we deal with on an annual basis, everything else is just kind of what's the topic of the year, and what do we want to try to get accomplished.
Any guesses yet?
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I mean, with some of the building type projects,
Karen's just nodding her head.
I mean, we only put $510,000 aside on an annual basis. I mean, when you think of what's on the list, it doesn't take long to get rid of that. So, that's what, that's why some of those projects on that list will be on that list for a while.
Mhm.
Again, as Karen knows.
Right. So we'll we'll kind of gather the information and then we'll kind of take them on piece by piece and see where we end up and see what we need to do.
So heavy money's on the legislature. The unexpected crisis.
Yeah.
We've already had floods, pandemic, and, what do you call that one? State intervention in the economic process.
Yeah, I mean, and as we've talked about inheritance tax, inheritance tax would become a player right away.
Mhm.
Right.
Right away, it would become a player.
Those new rates go into effect 1/1, so we're just, whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen over the next few months. So whatever's new, we'll see, we'll
Right.
have some trend data.
Well, that's from the haircut last year.
Right, but it's just going into effect now, so we didn't even see any of that we've collected so far.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, the other thing that I threw out there for you was just kind of what the prior year budget instructions look like that we kind of set out there. And we will be able to talk about these as we kind of go through everything, but it felt like last year was the year of no FTEs. It
Right.
seems like that was the only thing that we were just constantly saying. So.
At least not on property taxes.
Right, right. So, we'll kind of have to, we'll have to kind of think about some of that kind of stuff. But just to kind of remind everybody, middle of March is when we try to get the departments to start doing their next budget numbers. So, we'll be working to get everything together so that the middle of March we can say, okay, departments, you got a month to enter your information. And then after the middle of March, usually they'll have the month April 15th, then we'll start booking budget hearings. So usually the end of April, probably through the middle of June. So we'll start tackling all of those. And Matt, for your purposes, when we do budget hearings, we usually tend to do them during the staff meetings. So we'll usually do a couple, 3 on a Thursday. Sometimes on Tuesdays after the regular budget meeting, we'll do a staff meeting and just do 2 or 3 budget hearings. So that's kind of how we get those in from the middle or from late April through mid-June. We probably, I don't remember how many we probably do. We probably do 25, 30 of them. But we usually do them a couple, 3 at a time.
Do you remember when we used to do them in a day and a half?
I do. I do.
I don't know how you could even absorb
Oh,
it.
that was
Probably
horrible.
seems much less painful for everyone involved.
So, yeah, we used to knock them out.
We used to pound them out.
Yeah, we did.
Let's not go back to that.
No, absolutely.
I'm not planning on. I'm a little bit older. I can't remember stuff as well, so I need them bits and pieces. So that's what we kind of try to do, and then that gets us to almost the end of our fiscal year where we can start closing out June number so that we can start then knowing where did fund balances end up. And then in July, that's what we kind of work with. We start putting everything together because by the end of July we got to have a balanced budget. So that's kind of what we shoot for as we go over the next few months. Anything else?
Done a good job.
Move, we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Leslie, would you please call the roll?
Roma,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
Krista.
Yes.
5-0, motion carries.
Hmm.
Nice work,